Okay, here we go, on to chapter 6, and it's the 5th commandment. Now, the first 4 commandments talked about how we balance the priority we feel God is in our life. Where does he stand in the level of all the other things that are important? Is he the only thing that is important by having no other gods? Is he important enough that we're not going to try to make something that looks like him so we can think about him when we see it, because God cannot be contained? Is he so important that we don't make other things we look at and spend time instead of him? Do we take his name and live it so that we share his character by our lives, by not just not taking his name in vain, but not taking his character in vain? And then how do we treat and handle the way God handled everything after he had created? He sat back and said, this is good. And he created a day of rest. And so how do we take rest and make it an active part of our life, which is kind of an oxymoron? Take rest, make it active. And so those were the first 4. How is God's priority lived out in your life? By how you put him on your calendar, how you put him on the front seat of your car, how you live with him, with you in every part of your life. So today we're going to talk about the 5th commandment, and I named it the stools of whom you honor. We like to put people up on pedestals. It is part of our human nature. We are watching football and we are looking at these football players and we wear their jerseys and we have their bobbleheads. We have the Olympics coming up and we place people on stands of honor, on stools of honor, based on how good they performed. You don't find the guy who came in last in the marathon up on the podium. No, we place people who earned a special honor on the podium. So we all place things on stools, and it's talking about how you honor people, the stools that hold people you honor. Now, the 5th commandment goes right to the crux of the origination of life. So life originates with a father and a mother. Spoiler alert if you didn't know that. It originates with male and female, and that's how God created it. You can try all sorts of stuff in the medical field, but it all comes down to you have to have a male sperm and you have to have a female egg. That's where it starts. So obviously, God chose, when he got done handling the importance of who he is in our lives, he starts at the very basic of life, how you came into the world. And the 5th commandment says, honor thy father and mother as the Lord your God has commanded you. And if we could stop right there, that would be awesome, because we could talk for days about honoring our parents. But this is the only commandment he adds a little zinger to. That your days may be long, and then it be well with you in the land which your Lord God is giving you. Okay, now every one of the commandments also has New Testament that jumps up and down at us, and that would be Ephesians. And in Ephesians 6, there's a couple other places too, it talks about it, but in Ephesians 6, children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and your mother, which is the first commandment with a promise, that it may go well with you and that you may enjoy long life on the earth. So when we take a look at that, it's actually just, well, if you don't honor your parents, are you going to die at 14? No, that's not what he's talking about. When you treat people with honor, just thinking in common sense, when you treat someone with honor, 99.9% of the time the honor will be returned. If you treat someone with sarcasm, 100%. Almost. It will be returned. How we treat people is how it comes back to us. It goes along with Matthew, judge not that ye be not judged. How we deal with people not only reflects our character, and if it does not reflect the character of God, but it does make a difference. And back in the Bible days, there were examples of children who were disobedient to their parents and they could be stoned. God isn't getting at, if you don't do what your parents say, that's the end of you. He's getting at a respect factor. But I have the question that I can't have an answer to, but I have the question. Why wouldn't the first 4 be with a promise? I would think that the first 4 commandments, when I'm looking at them, when I'm thinking if I wanted a commandment with a promise, wouldn't it be that I'm not going to have any gods before you, Lord? That would be the promise. That would be a good one to put a promise to. Or I haven't made any golden images, no idols. I don't put my cell phone on top of where I put you. I don't put the TV. I don't put... You're the number 1, Lord. That's who I'm worshiping. I should have a promise attached to that. Or I have done the Sabbath. Lord, I get away and I'm quiet and I listen to you and I think about you in my life. I reflect the good you've done in my life. Oh, that should have a promise to it. God didn't do it that way. We don't have answers, but I think part of it is because how we treat people on earth is how people see God lived out on earth. So, what does honor mean to you? It's not an attitude always, it's a behavior. And it's a responsibility for caring for humanity that encompasses both the young and the old. Now, if we went on a little bit in Ephesians, we would also find a verse that said, "Fathers, do not provoke or exasperate your children." It's a circle. Children honor and respect their parents, and parents are honored and respected because their character is honorable and respectable. So Leviticus 19:32, "Rise in the presence of the aged, show respect for the elderly, and revere your God. I am the Lord." Wow. So it basically says that the stools of who we honor, it's not just thy father and thy mother, the ones whose blood type you have and whose genetics you reflect. It's a part of a community and how we treat people that God's getting at. It's not like, okay, Aunt Bethel, you don't have to be honorable to her. Uncle George, well, we know we don't want to be honorable. That's not what he's getting at. I mean, Aunt Bethel was a wonderful lady. I had an Aunt Bethel. And Uncle George, I don't think I had an Uncle George. But the concept is there's a respect issue for people and how to treat people, and that is where the promise lies. It's not as if I have done everything my parents said, checkbox. It's an attitude, it's a behavior. It's creating a society in which the elderly are cared for. Okay, now I joked and said, okay, yeah, we're going to talk about old people. You don't care for the elderly when you suddenly get to be 75 years old and you need to be cared for. It's a community mindset that we want started when people are young, when children are young, so it becomes a part of who they are. So in Romans 13:7 it says, "Give everyone what you owe him. If you owe him taxes, pay taxes. If revenue, then revenue. If respect, then respect. If honor, then honor." So we are supposed to know who gets the honor and who gets the respect, and it's a trickle down because of how we look at our community. So there are stools, and we place people on them. So honoring our parents is a duty we owe God. Children and parent relationships parallel the relationships we have to God. Now, we will get into some of the people who don't deserve to be honored. But God's just setting a generalized statement, this is how a healthy community reflecting the character of God lives. So our parents gave us life. God gave life to mankind. What we honor shows how we honor God. If we honor the idols and we honor our checkbook and our telephone more than we spend time in the Bible, by not honoring the Bible, it shows how we honor God. 6 times in the New Testament, this commandment is emphasized. And I think more importantly, it's we don't honor people for what they do. We honor them for who they are. It's a position of honor. And yes, we honor people for their character, but we don't always honor them necessarily based on the fact that they deserve honor. In the New Testament, I think it was the Timothy's that he talks about, pray for your government, pray for the leaders. And that would have been Nero, who was killing people. So God was saying there's a respect there. There's an honor. You honor the position. You honor them for who they are, not necessarily for what they've done. It's a nuclear family. It's a community family. It's a spiritual family. So we honor God. It's more than an obligation. We honor a parent that we have. And if you think about it, and I don't think I've ever heard anybody say this before, so God's best creation was day 8. Okay, we all know that 7 days of creation or 6 days of creation, God rested, but on the next day, God created the family. And Adam and Eve became parents. And I'm not saying it was the very next day. You know, it's figuratively. But we also know that there's been rocky family relationships since the family was established because we live in a fallen world. So I thought this was interesting. I don't know where I heard this statement, but all of us will die, not all of us will live. How we live to be honorable to those who rub shoulders with, set examples to, and leave reminders for. How can we and how do we live to be honorable for those we rub shoulders with, our families, our communities, set examples to everyone, younger generation, older generation, and leave reminders for. Now, when we were kids, my father would often say, remember, you're a Campbell. I never knew my grandfather Campbell, but I've talked to a lot of people who knew him, and you'd think he was a saint. Thought very, very highly of him. My father thought very highly of him. My grandmother, very highly. My aunt, people that knew him, church people, very highly of Otis Campbell. He left a reminder that character is important. And then we have some other Campbells in our background that Grandma used to read the letters, and we don't know what happened to him after my aunt died. I don't know what happened. Who knows? But they were scripted, and they were from a bunch of our family from Indiana, and they had done a few things that were slightly illegal, and so they wrote their letters in scripted so that Grandma would read the letter and it sounded just like a normal letter. But if you left certain words out or you added something, then it would really tell what was going on. That is definitely a reminder to leave too. So Ephesians 6:1-4 talks about this. It talks about children, do what your parents tell you. This is only right. It's the first commandment with a promise. And then it says, don't exasperate your children by coming down hard on them. Take them by the hand and lead them in the way of the master. If we're going to honor anybody, looking up, looking backwards, how we have honored God is going to affect the way we honor other people. It has to, because that is the way our world operates. So, Chinese proverb, thought that was interesting. When you have children, you understand what you owe your parents. I never did anything right. I was a horrible parent. I had a 16-year-old that was quite adamant about telling me how poor a parent I was. And, I don't know, maybe a year ago now, I got a note from her telling me what a wonderful mother I had been and how she saw things differently now because she has a child. And the other day she called me up and she was telling me about Lucy and some of her actions, and then she said, Mom, I'm raising a little sinner. And I said, yeah, that went through my mind too. So when you have children, you understand what you owe your parents. There's a Japanese fable, I think, was about they all lived in the same home. So the many multiple generations, and Grandpa got to be where he couldn't handle himself anymore. He was just in a chair, and his life was over. So one day the father said, son, we're going to go take Grandpa up to the mountain, and put Grandpa in a wheelchair, which is what the fable said, pushed him up the mountain, and they got up there and they put Grandpa on a stump and assumingly would leave him to die. And the little boy goes, Daddy, I'm really glad I came up here. The dad goes, oh, why? And he goes, I'm glad I'm seeing all this. And the dad goes, really? And he goes, yeah, because now I know what I can do with you when you get old. They brought Grandpa down the hill and cared for him for the rest of their life. It changes. So how do I want to be honored? it's really interesting, because if we are going to honor our parents and have the promise that life, God will bless us for honoring people, even though they are not worthy of honor, am I willing to change and accept mistakes of the past? I thought my parents were poor parents too, until I had this 16-year-old who probably talked just like me, and it's like going, oh, now I know why my father said the things he did, and I now understand why mother would, it makes a difference. And so am I willing to accept things in the past that I don't know what it was like to get married at 16 and have 4 children by the time you're 24 and not even have a high school diploma and have no money? I mean, we had nothing. I don't know what it's like. I don't know what my mother went through. I don't know what my grandmother went through getting married in 1920 and then hitting the Depression with a baby. I don't know what they went through. But the things that we might see as mistakes of the past, they're not mine to judge, and I have to be willing to accept them and move on, because life is too short to hold grudges over people in the past for things they have done. Even if it's to me, life is too short to be tied down by the baggage of chains of regret and unforgiveness around my neck. I'm going to sink every time. And I have to be willing to openly communicate with that, and that forgiveness of moving on. The forgiveness, the ability to just say, it's not going to be what takes my life and changes it for the worst. One of the books that I really like is this, The Tender Commandments by Ron Meal. And he said, now that I'm over a half century old, I've discovered something. I've discovered that in most cases, my mom did what she thought was right when she was raising me. At the time, I thought, you can't be right, you don't like me, you hate me, you're too hard on me, you're trying to make my life miserable. But now I realize she knew something I didn't, that it was really the best for me. And even in times where we don't have the best parenting, and we don't have situations that are good, and we maybe are dealing with the hurt and neglect of a selfish parent, how do we walk in obedience? By forgiving, by letting it go. And Jesus, in Isaiah, we read quite a thing about the prophecy of, we despise, rejected, a man of sorrows, is going to be beaten. And Jesus knew what it would be like, or he knew what it was like to be ill-treated and abused, yet his go-to was forgiveness. And when it comes to true forgiveness, the innocent party almost always pays. The one who forgives, the one who's been offended, is usually the one who pays the price, but it's a price worth paying. I thought that was really, really interesting, because we have a generation that is holding on to the ills and the issues of the past, of someone else's behavior toward them, and it's stifling their ability to live in the present. And I don't know what that's like, but I know that moving on from it creates a much better, deeper, fulfilled life than walking with the baggage around your neck. And if Jesus knew how to forgive and could forgive what he forgave, then it's something that we can be learned. How do I show love? How do I want to be loved? How do I accept love? How do I want to be forgiven? Am I willing to forgive? Am I willing to accept forgiveness? But most of all, am I willing to turn it over to God? So there's so many verses in the Old Testament that talk about honoring parents. Proverbs. And there's also a whole bunch that talked about dishonoring, and that was before the 10 Commandments. So we have Genesis talking about the dishonoring of Noah. So there was a understanding of what honor was and what honor wasn't. And that came before he gave the 10 Commandments. And God is telling us, my character is honor. Honor people. And it's a community-driven, we honor all peoples from young to old. And we honor people who brought life to us. And if we honor the people who bring life to us, our life will be much more fulfilling than if we bear the angry bitterness of what somebody didn't do, and we can't go back and undo it. And we don't know how we would have acted if we were in their shoes. So forgiveness and putting it to rest is one of the promise, one of those that it will go well with us. Otherwise, it's going to eat us alive. So to define honor, it's great esteem, profound respect, recognizing one's value, not necessarily what one does to get their value. To define respect, to regard, to revere something of worth. So when we think about it, who are honor stools? And Proverbs says, listen, my son, to my father's instruction. Do not forsake your mother's teaching. There's a value in older men and older women teaching the younger. And we see that in the prison epistles. Listen to your father who gave you life. Do not despise your mother when she is old. But if a widow has children or grandchildren, these should learn, first of all, to put their religion into practice by caring for their own families and so repaying their parents and grandparents. It's a community character that reflects the community of God. How we treat those older than us, how we treat those younger than us, who we honor and what stools we put them on. And I don't mean we worship them. I mean we give them the honor they're due. If you win the gold medal in the Olympics, you deserve that honor. And that honor is based on, the fastest in the world, which I will never have to worry about being. But we don't put the drunkard up there because he has not exhibited something to be honorable for. So I think as we go through and we look at the stools of who we honor, I think the biggest question that I ask myself is when I think about people, when I think about my parents who now they're all of them are gone, my father, my mother, my stepdad, how do I think of them? How do I portray them in my mind? How do I share that with my children? And we just buried Grandpa a month and a half ago, 2 months ago maybe now, I can't think. And it was a very incredible service of honoring a man who stepped in to be our father for 36 years. That is something we honor. We honor his quiet spirit, his behind the scenes doing things, his intentional ways of caring for people without saying a word. That's who we honor. And how do we then honor older people? I spent yesterday going to see Monica, not Monica, another Monica. I used to play music with Woody, and she's got to be 90 now, I think, or close to it. I honor her by just going and sitting in her big brown leather couch and laughing and talking, giving her time, investing. And on the 8th day, figuratively, God created the family. And the family unit, I think, is one of the things God wants us to look at and hold up on our stools. So that's lesson 5, commandment 5. Lesson 6, the stools of who we honor. Hope it gave you something to think about.